Szanowni Państwo, bardzo też również witam serdecznie i dziękuję za tak liczną obecność, bo ona jest dla nas zarówno inspiracją do działań, jak i też pewną nagrodą za to, co zrobiliśmy, bo Państwa obecność jakby jest tutaj dla nas kluczowa i bardzo ważna. Chciałem dwa słowa powiedzieć, dlaczego wybraliśmy taki tytuł, bo wydaje się, tak jak Pan Minister też zauważył, za co bardzo też dziękuję, chcemy mówić o tym, co za lat 2, 3, 5, żeby ten skomplikowany przedsięwzięcie, jakim jest zmiana systemu zdrowia, mogło być w sposób skoordynowany, dobrze zaplanowany, przeprowadzony. Więc dwa słowa, dlaczego mówimy tym razem również o globalizacji w ochronie zdrowia, co wydawałoby się być może trochę zaskakujące. Zmiana i jakieś wnioski, które będziemy chcieli z tego sformułować. Otóż mamy dwa ważne megatrendy, na które warto zwrócić uwagę. Po pierwsze, potrzeby pacjentów są uniwersalne. To znaczy, i to coraz bardziej widać, jeśli odniesiemy do kwestii prewencji, personalizacji opieki czy ciągłości opieki. To są rzeczy, które będą ważne i są dostępne i wypracowane w skali globalnej. Drugim kluczową rzeczą, jeśli chodzi o cyfryzację, to trzeba wiedzieć i mieć to na uwadze, że digital world, cyfrowy świat nie zna granic. On po prostu ze swojej natury jest globalny. Znaczy nie ma tego pojęcia XIX-wiecznych granic. I mając na uwadze te dwa trendy, tak naprawdę możemy zastanowić się, co nas czeka. Mamy globalizację, jeśli chodzi, czy ten uniwersalny wymiar, jakim jest uniwersalna perspektywa pacjenta, i mamy ten bezgraniczny, powiedziałbym po angielsku borderless, wymiar związany z rozprzestrzenianiem się i owej cyfryzacji, czy cyfrowego świata, z którego coraz bardziej korzystamy. I to wszystko, jeśli chodzi o obszar zdrowia, może być zanurzone jest zanurzone w pewnym kontekście. Czym jest ten kontekst? To jest kontekst systemu zdrowia, który de facto nie jest gotowy na ową zmianę. System zdrowia w małym zakresie bierze pod uwagę owe globalne konteksty. I teraz oczywiście może być tak, że ten system, w którym to wszystko jest zanurzone, jest w pewnym sensie otwarty na innowacje, poszukuje efektywności. I wtedy taki świat łatwiej te nowe trendy będzie przyswajać, albo może być też tak, że ten świat nie jest gotowy na innowacje, że ten świat tak naprawdę jest efektywny. Znaczy nie ma w sobie pewnych bodźców budujących efektywność i wtedy te nowe trendy raczej będą ograniczane i ten świat będzie próbował je odsunąć czy wyłączyć. I o tym będziemy mówili myślę, w ciągu tych sesji. Czyli wnioski, które formułujemy, dotyczą uniwersalnych potrzeb pacjentów, cyfrowego świata, który jest globalny, nie zna granic i co najważniejsze, Polska nie jest izolowaną wyspą. My w tym istniejemy. Niezależnie od tego, czy my to uznajemy, czy nie uznajemy, jesteśmy w to zanurzeni. Ten świat się taki stanie. I teraz od nas zależy, jak z tym sobie poradzimy, jak wykorzystamy tą szansę. Szansę związaną z wykorzystaniem tego potencjału, który to nowe otoczenie nam stwarza, ale też ważne i fundamentalne pytanie, jak my chcemy to otoczenie kreować, na ile my chcemy uczestniczyć w owym globalnym świecie, na ile polskie rozwiązania mogą stać się elementem globalnego świata. Jak nie postawimy sobie takiej aspiracji, to najprawdopodobniej to się nie wydarzy. To jest trudna aspiracja. Ale może to jest ten czas pewnego przełomu, pewnej zmiany, która następuje, żeby taką aspirację sformułować i mając dość duże zasoby na rozwój kraju, również te zasoby wykorzystać w byciu liderem cyfrowego świata. Mniejsze kraje to zrobiły. Mamy przykłady zarówno trochę na północny wschód od nas, jakim będziemy tutaj mieli Hansa Erika Hendersona z Danii. To są kraje mniejsze od Polski, które wykorzystały tą szansę rozwojową związaną z nowymi technologiami, z pewnym przełomem i zmianą kontekstu, w którym funkcjonujemy. O tym będę chciał, żebyśmy porozmawiali też w panelu dyskusyjnym, który za chwilę. Także dziękuję Państwu, zachęcam do skorzystania z tego naszego wydarzenia. networking jest fundamentalnym miejscem, znaczy jakim wymiarem forum, także mam nadzieję, że to będzie dla nas wszystkich dobry czas. Dziękuję.
Bardzo dziękujemy, panie dyrektorze. Proszę państwa, jest dyrektorem do spraw klinicznych w Health Information and Management System Society. Ma bogate doświadczenie i wiedzę w obszarze zdrowia i opieki zdrowotnej. Zajmuje stanowisko starszego doradcy w Public Health England, rządowej agencji wykonawczej Wielkiej Brytanii. Wykładowca akademicki w Kanadzie, profesor wizytujący, profesor badań wspomagających. Jest także lekarzem pierwszego kontaktu. Przed państwem pan Charles Alesi. Zapraszam.
Thank you. My Polish is appalling, so I'm not even going to try. As you can see, I've got a very English accent because that's where I come from. So what am I going to speak about today? I really want to talk about a couple of things in the few minutes we have. First of all, why HIMSS? What is HIMSS and why are we here? Secondly, we heard a little bit about digital transformation earlier on with the pretty impressive achievements which you mentioned around e-prescriptions in Poland in a remarkably short time. And the question is really, can I miss this train which is taking off at the moment? Because I would suggest that the train is global, and I think we can't miss the train, but I'll describe that a little bit further. Secondly, how health and care and medicine is changing with new concepts around precision health and precision medicine. And finally, are there some solutions to help us on this journey? And remember, this is not a journey you're here on your own. So what is HIMSS? HIMSS is a global not-for-profit organization, and I really want to only mention one thing, which is the vision right at the bottom. It's to realize the full health potential of every human everywhere. Because in essence, what we do is we advise governments, we advise institutions, we're vendor neutral. In other words, we're not tied to any vendors, so we can give honest and expert opinion in terms of how to proceed in digitization. And we also have developed the world's standards in terms of maturity models for all aspects of digital transformation. And we'll be hearing something more about that later this afternoon. So let's get on with what we want to talk about. So is digital transformation inevitable? I would suggest it's absolutely inevitable. And there are various reasons for that, and I tried to write them down on this slide, one of which, of course, is the fact that we're all aging, certainly in places like Poland, perhaps not to the extent of Japan, which is where I spent quite a lot of my time, or even if you go further north, Finland, where they have an even greater aging population. But with aging population comes multimorbidity, and the old ways of working really are very, very difficult to continue using. Because with that comes the concept of moving from volume capitated-based systems to value. In other words, moving to population-based, socialized, European ways of delivering healthcare. And in these ways, of course, prevention becomes so much more important, both prevention and reduction of risk. And to do that, you need a single version of the truth. And the single version of the truth can only be delivered using a digital process, because you can't have that single version of the truth present in exactly the same place in a whole variety of places, which is where you want to deliver care. Also, of course, the moment you have digital mechanisms to deliver care, you immediately are then able to start to see some insights and to develop processes to assist you in delivering that care, from artificial intelligence and its deployment, really to the fact that you start to understand how there are differences between the people that deliver care, and perhaps exploiting the best and assisting the ones that don't quite manage it to get there faster. But actually, even WHO, when we look to what they did in the European WHO, they were talking specifically about the fact that digital technology and transformation is something which all countries in Europe should be delivering, and the logic and reasons for that are written below. They extend the scope, transparency, and accessibility of health services. So, what are the opportunities? What is the benefit of this? I think we really need to appreciate what an opportunity digital transformation is. We're in a situation where we can actually start to rethink healthcare and rethink healthcare for the 21st century. Because the patients of the 21st century are very different to the patients of the 20th century and before. They are not people who can be preached to and told what to do by physicians. They want to be involved in their care. They need to be involved in their care. And because of the democratization of information associated with the internet, the availability of information means they can be as well informed, even though they lack the insight, perhaps, that physicians do. So we really do have an opportunity here to rethink medicine. And that opportunity starts with precision medicine, where medicine becomes much more personalized to the individual. In other words, instead of thinking of population health as us all being the same, we're all different. And with digitization, it's possible to actually deliver care in a very different way for each individual. And it's also possible to start thinking of digital public health as well. And this is really revolutionary. We're starting to see some of this precision health, which is the flip side of precision medicine. In other words, delivering public health messaging, public health delivery of care on a personalized basis rather than on a population basis. So with precision medicine, we know exactly what we're dealing with. Precision medicine, we're moving from a situation where, for example, with screening, we don't necessarily go to whole populations. We treat each individual differently. We're starting to think in terms of how to manage shared decision-making between physicians and between health workers and patients. And also, we're running into some difficulty in managing the interests of the individual as against the interests of a whole population. And in socialized medicine, of course, this is a particularly difficult area to manage. And when I say difficult, I think it's worth mentioning the fact that this journey is actually proving to be quite difficult for physicians. And I just have a single slide I just want to show you, which is something which we're seeing much more of globally. This is not an American problem. This is not even a European problem. I've seen it in every country I've been to in the world. And it's really around physician burnout, to which I add nurse burnout, to which I add health worker burnout. Because people who are involved in healthcare are being asked to do more and more within a short consultation. I wish I had the time to go through this in much more detail, because this is really fundamental to how perhaps we can overcome all these issues. But we need to understand, we need to change something in what we're doing, because unless we do, the people delivering the care are going to find it next to impossible to deliver it. And when you have rates of burnout which are hitting 50%, 60%, this is really quite serious, because of course we also have a problem with workforce. Our workforce is aging, and our workforce is burning out. So there's less of them, they're older, and suddenly we're going to have no workforce at all unless we're careful. The other issue is the different nature, and it's part of burnout, of the physician and the patient relationship. This also is really quite difficult, because a lot of physicians are not trained to accompany an individual along a life journey in non-communicable diseases. But they're somehow forced to do that in a situation where they don't have enough time to do it, they're not trained in behavior modification, and really they're finding it more and more difficult to fit in the practice of medicine within the consultation, what time there is of a consultation associated with that. So there are some really fundamental issues around the changing nature of the physician and burnout relationship, because the whole nature of consultations has changed. And let me just draw your attention to this. This is what we used to. A patient seeing the physician, and then either being referred for secondary care, or perhaps being managed in a primary care home, which is really with an extended primary care situation. I was chair of the National Association of Primary Care in England. I'm a GP, I'm a generalist. So this is the world I got trained in. But the new world is very, very different. The new world is one where the number of people involved in the care for non-communicable disease is increased dramatically. The amount of self-monitoring and self-care is increasing all the time. More and more people are managing their own care. And I really think we haven't quite managed to achieve this. Note the date, by the way. This was an aspiration in 2015 in the United States that would get there by 2020. I think they haven't got there by 2020. We're not there yet. They've got a few months. But they haven't even really achieved a good primary care home yet. So they haven't even really achieved this situation, which is really what we're aspiring to do when I graduated in 1979. It's a long time ago. So we have a lot to do in a very, very short amount of time. And inevitably then you ask, how are we going to handle this transition? Because if we really are going to go from what we had in the past to moving to where we need in the future, it's going to be next to impossible. We still haven't managed the governance of all these situations. We still haven't quite understood the effect of aging and the effect of aging on both our workforce and the amount of work associated with aging and multimorbidity. And we still haven't really delivered digital transformation. So it's really going to be difficult to do this unless we really get digital systems embedded within the different health systems of the world, and also unless we get the training of physicians and everything else that goes with it working at the same pace. I mentioned precision health. I just want to touch on it for a second. This basically is the use of data and information, layering of all the data and information to start having a conversation directly with the citizen. And we're doing this in Public Health England at the moment. In essence, even using gamification to assist individuals in having healthier lives, because we're particularly interested in cutting the level of type 2 diabetes, which, as we know, we can manage, and also to manage cognitive decline and dementia, which, of course, is one of the biggest problems which we have globally. And these approaches are basically person-to-person approach, digitally enabled, which will enable us, perhaps, to have more of an effect on how humans are behaving and how patients are behaving. And this is one of the most exciting parts of health and care, which I'm seeing globally. But let's move to solutions, because we have no time. And I think there are really only 4 big solutions here, which are really important. One, we really need to support our workforce. Unless we support our workforce, I think we'll get into difficulty, and get into difficulty quickly. It's really important we assist them with how they're managing EMR deployments in hospitals, and also ensure that we manage to assist them in clinical decision support. It's getting much more difficult for physicians to know everything about everything in terms of the amount of new guidelines coming out practically every day. So we need systems which are embedded within our clinical systems to be able to deliver that. The training issues are really important. We have quite a few specific training programs within HIMSS associated with assisting clinicians to understand the digital world, to better handle a consultation. And that includes some digital immersion courses, which are really quite short, 1-2-day courses for physicians, to be able to understand how this is going to affect me. And we need to really start to explore digital transformation. But the greatest solution, of course, is understanding how we're moving along this digital journey and really using maturity models, which HIMSS has, is one way to be able to deliver that, because these maturity models are granular enough and personal enough for one to be able to understand how to get to the next stage and the means to get to the next stage, as well as being able to measure what's going on. So, one last bit I want to talk about is what's happening in other places. And really, it's very difficult to do this in a few seconds, but I'll give you an oversight. There are quite a few interesting initiatives going on. Europe is part. I'm not going to mention Denmark, by the way, because I understand Denmark is here, so it's great. But certainly, I highlighted a few places. France, in terms of the way they're managing the aging population, using the post office and postmen to actually deliver care for older people, which is a really good use of a redundant workforce. The Netherlands in making GDPR work better than I have seen in a lot of countries, and it's really in the application of GDPR, so it doesn't stop digital transformation, but in many respects, it does what it's supposed to do, which is give power to the citizens, so it enhances it. Spain, because it has some of the best integrated systems in some of the regions, where they have health and social care working in the same place, and also in places like Valencia, where they have transferred the responsibility of delivering health and care to separate institutions. I don't think we can not mention Finland, because in many respects it is a real example of how a country can actually move along digital transformation. It started in the same way it started in Poland with e-prescription, and they've developed into My Kanta, which is an extraordinary digital gateway, which is the second most visited gateway in Finland, not in healthcare, in everything. That really shows the level of buy-in of the population. In England, where we're doing a little bit of predictive prevention, I'm not going to mention anything more about England because I'm embarrassed. In Asia, where paradoxically in the Gulf states you're seeing some of the most extraordinary changes, and the speed with which they're developing those changes is really breathtaking. In places they've developed interoperability layers where all digital information is collated, so it's available to everybody else. Perhaps it's because they don't have a lot of systems they had to take away to replace them with digital systems, but they're moving very, very, very fast. And then, of course, places like Singapore, which are small enough to really start to develop systems and where the population and the government are so close to each other that they can really develop care very, very quickly. And I must finish with Japan, because in many respects it's the most difficult place and the easiest place, one of the best social care systems I've ever seen, and perhaps one of the most fragmented medical systems that we've ever seen, together with the greatest aging in population. So enormous change is happening everywhere. So Poland is not on its own in its journey, and don't think you're at the back of the journey. You're not at the front, but you're with a lot of people really starting on this transformation, because after all, it is a journey. I just want to leave you with one last thought, and it's a quote. And it's a quote really talking about what the doctor in the future will do. He'll give no medicines, will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the causes and prevention of disease. What is surprising is who this person is who said this. It's Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, which is why you can see me here today. What's even more interesting is the fact that this statement was made 115 years ago, in 1904. We have a way to go. We haven't really done that much over the last 100 years. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękujemy. Pan Charles LC wróci jeszcze do nas niebawem w panelu, który poprowadzi dyrektor Pruszko. Proszę Państwa, od 25 lat łączy obszary kliniczne, polityki i biznesu z obszarem interoperacyjności systemów IT. Przewodniczący Integrating the Healthcare Enterprise, który działa w ramach Europe. Europe. Jest odpowiedzialny za standaryzację oraz architekturę informatyczną w obszarze interoperacyjność i bezpieczeństwo w GE Healthcare. Przed Państwem pan Charles Parisot. Prosimy.
Thank you for your very warm welcome. I was in this forum 2 years ago, and I enjoy coming back this year, seeing some of the progress that have been made, and the maturity of the reflection, how we can make e-health work better in Europe, and especially in Poland. I would like to bring the conversation and build upon the previous presentation. Digitalization of health is a trend. What is the way in that trend to make interoperability happen? Do we need interoperability for health digitalization? That's the question I would like to begin to address or continue to address, because this is a conversation that I think has started in Poland a few years back, where progress has been made, but maybe not as much as you would have hoped 3 or 4 years ago. We've heard already from Arthur Prisco and the previous speaker that we need to not look only at health care delivery, but increasingly pay attention to health prevention and the management of wellness. It's important to see those 3 circles. You see that they are overlapping, and this is where a number of issues of interoperability are coming from. They don't live independently from each other, although up to now they have pretty much lived independently from each other. And in each one of those circles, we are deploying applications, IT systems, and increasingly devices and personal devices. And with this deployment, the scale of the interoperability problem is actually getting worse, more complex, more challenging, but also more necessary. So we have this flow of information which is needed across all of those domains. We realize that we will need to share information across those domains with the patient in the center, and realize that we need to involve, and I listed 5 main stakeholders. This is not an exhaustive list, but just to give a sense of breadth. The obvious governmental entity, the public and private health care delivery organization, and the public and private health care financing, insuring organization that are helping make the system work in a sustainable financial way. We have citizens who are sometimes wondering if they are citizens or if they are consumers, or they are consumer citizens or citizen consumers. And very often they are patients. So that's a very important element. And then I'm adding the last bullet, which is the commercial suppliers. Because as soon as you speak of interoperability and of application and IT system and devices, you say, hey, I will have to procure those, deploy those, install those, configure those. And they are typically coming from commercial suppliers. So they need to be put in the picture, and I will actually spend a fair amount of time speaking to their role, the positive and the challenges that they are bringing inside the picture. This is what we've heard before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, But as you walk through each one of those blue boxes moving to those gray boxes, because they're not quite real yet, you discover that, oh, population health management means I will have a lot of information flowing and need to aggregate this information in order to devise strategies and move forward. If I truly want to be patient-centric, it means that not only the patient has access to the patient health data, but the patient health data is shared and accessible to the various care delivery, wellness support, and prevention action for that patient. We want to change the way we pay for healthcare. This is a long conversation. This is not a finished conversation. But again, interoperability. And connecting all of this, making it more efficient, of course, requires interoperability. I want to give you a quick view of how, over the last 20, 30 years, our scope on interoperability has evolved simply in the healthcare bubble. We started speaking of interoperability within the hospitals. We had to better manage our hospital, put a hospital information system, connect departments, bring and flow orders and results so that care can be delivered within the hospital. That was the topic on conversation before and after 2000. Have we completed this? In a few cases, we're fairly well along the way, but we still have smaller hospitals that are still struggling in this area, but they should not be struggling. This is something which is known, can be done, and we have moved on to, and we are still in that phase where we have realized that hospitals are very often specialized. They need to collaborate between more generic community hospital, more specialized cancer, cardiac, and so forth hospitals. So hospitals need to do some cross-hospital federation and sharing the patient and moving the patient, or moving the data and not moving the patient. Okay? This is where a lot of effort has been made by a number of countries in Europe and around the world to interconnect those hospitals, to actually connect those hospitals to the community where we have the primary care being delivered and other important elements. And the focus has been, I would say, for the past 15 years at building those layers and this blue connection. And you have made some progress in Finland there, in Poland, sorry. Finland has also made some progress. They started 10 years earlier, so that helps. But we are still doing and have to do a fair amount of effort in that scope of interoperability. Where are we going next? Where we're going next is all of this has to be made much more mobile, much more friendly to the patient, much more friendly to the care providers. So they don't have to run around as much as they do today. So simply having this little mobile app or a few devices being connected there is actually creating major challenges. And I need to say that we are just entering these aspects. Very few countries have a strategy that is more than just started to do that. It has not delivered yet. We don't know yet what are the good ideas and the bad ideas and what is going to work and what is going to fail. But this is definitely the next generation. Now, you may still be struggling with the middle tower. That's fine. But understand that the strategy has to evolve. So in the world of prevention, very little investment has been done so far. This is definitely a weak area, but an area where that is receiving more and more attention. And large area of effort has been done around the population health and the public health and the creation of national indicators, surveillance of pandemics, disease registries, vaccination campaigns, and we see a trend which is to, I would say, do a little bit more personalized things, but we are far, far, far from personalizing medicine. So what I've said, hey, the trend is actually to make things more local, to understand that in certain regions of Poland, there is a predominance of certain disease and certain dimension of care that has to be improved because the outcome are not what they should be. And this may not be the case in another region or another city. So you're now going to start localizing the picture and the control that you can, the support you can provide in health prevention. From an interoperability standpoint, not good. Not good. It's all strings and spaghetti stuff, point to point, moving data in an ad hoc way, if we are still not filling a lot of forms or capturing forms on a web browser. This is poor man digitization, especially when the data exists somewhere else in a digital form. So unfortunately, this is life in the health prevention today, this fragmented interoperability, the re-entering of data, and there has been an interesting island of blue sky, which is the country that have a national insurance that sees all of the care being provided for reimbursement purposes, or actually collecting in a fairly easy way a fair amount of population data. So we are seeing those countries having an advantage, in a sense, over the countries that have a fragmented reimbursement or insurance type system, where the collection of that data for population health is much more fragmented. But reimbursement data is not clinical data. So let's not kid ourselves. This is a little stepping stone, a good one. Let's not ignore it, but just a starting point. In wellness, there it's a little bit the new frontier. We all hear about it in our newspapers. We are being bombarded by new technology, new devices that are being announced. We've tried a few of those. They usually sit on the shelf after a couple of weeks, couple of months of use. Some of them are surviving and are being used in a more ongoing way with the more, I would say, structured people who can include that in their life. But essentially, we've seen what I call the deadly triangle. A device, a cloud service specific to that device, and an app specific to the cloud service of the device. Works very well, but it's a little island. If you have a second device, you got a second app, a second cloud service, and if you try to move some of the data from one to the other, good luck. So yes, we can deploy a lot of wellness devices around, but the way the market is addressing the problem today is not going very far. So what should we do? Stop? No. We simply do not have an interoperability strategy in place. Now, there's an effort that has been going on for several years that was probably ahead of its time, that started with a vision of monitoring at home, and that has evolved into wellness too quickly, but that is becoming of age, I think, now. It's called Continua, and the Patient Care Health, the Personalized Care Health Alliance, and HIMSS has been assuming a leadership role in that area. I think this is something that we need to look at, rethink, rebake, and take to the next step. There is a need in the wellness area for interoperability, and we cannot ignore it. But I will tell you a little bit why this is a bigger challenge than a Polish challenge. This is a global challenge. This is not a problem we're going to solve in Poland or in any specific country. We have to look at it because it's a global market in a more global perspective. This is why we have this conference, to understand what we have to do at home and what we need to leverage from the global side and contribute to. So we have all of those entities. We look at those entities and I said, you know what? When I look at the commercial suppliers, I need to recognize that I have national and international suppliers. And when I walk in the hallway here, it's quite clear. But we also need to distinguish the suppliers that are what I call the insiders and the outsiders. The insiders are suppliers that have been supplying technology to the healthcare market. And they used to work in healthcare. Their customers are hospitals, doctor offices, pharmacies, and so forth. Those are, I would say, and I call them the insider because their mindset is a little bit different from the commercial supplier that are the outsiders that are largely international. It's not 100%, but it's largely international. And we need to understand that the thinking and the approach of the market of those two is quite different. And I will give you some examples. So if I want to influence the world of interoperability, which we all do, and we need to remember that interoperability is not a goal, it's a means for digital transformation. It's a means to empower the patients. It's a means to deliver better care. But it's a means that if we ignore it, we'll miss the bulk of our digital transformation. We also need to recognize that there are a number of people and entities that are involved in the digital transformation, and understanding their interest and their vision and their attitude is important. Not to criticize it, but to understand their logic. If you want to make a great football team, you need to understand the strengths and the perspective of each player and align those as much as you can to have a team strategy. So what we see is that some think of empowering the patient to control and access his own data. We are saying this in this room, but sometimes we are not necessarily doing this in our everyday life. Very often, governments have this strategy, but commercial entities are contributing to that strategy, but it's rarely their sole strategy because they have a market to address. We also have some entities that are concerned with keeping the data open, keeping, of course, with the authorization needed to access that data, but will the data be held by entities that are using it for their own benefit, but not for the benefit of the overall health system? This is, as you will see, a critical question. And finally, and this is revealed by the last point, some see the patient data as something they would like to gain control of to gain a competitive advantage. If I have more patient data than my competitor, I will have a better artificial intelligence, I will have a better product, I will have more chance to convince the consumer to buy my application, my service, and all of this. So we see that behind patient data and I would say generous, we want it patient-centric and we want the patient in charge, there are actually a variety of interests that are making the landscape a little more complex than it seems. So it's okay, in healthcare we know. There is complexity, we will not avoid it. But we need to manage this complexity. And this is where a conference as today is a great place to get those conversations going. So I'm going to throw some challenging, sometimes disturbing thoughts, and I would like us to have that conversation today and tomorrow. So we want to realize that up to today, the ones who were controlling the health data were essentially the care providers to deliver care. That's essentially what they did with. They did a little bit of research. And public health to deliver indicators and statistics at the national level. We've seen the commercial suppliers the outsiders address healthcare and try to enter into the health, wellness, and all of this, and fail for the last 15 years. Fail, but try again, and try again, until they will succeed. So we are seeing the outside commercial suppliers learning about healthcare and learning the way to move into the healthcare space, which they did not know. If you look at the large technology giant, their health strategies over the last 15 years have all failed. And I can give you the list, and the cemetery is long like this, of millions of dollars and euro invested for zero return. This is changing. So we need to be positive, understand that this is changing, but understand how is this changing. So I'm going to take a few examples. I apologize for those companies, but I'm advertising them as well. So Google has recently signed a 10-year agreement with Mayo Clinic. And I'm reading the healthcare IT news from HIMSS, read that, and I read it 2 times. I read it once and I say, wow, this is very interesting. This is a great news. But at the same time, when I reread it, I said, there are a number of questions that I'm wondering who is really asking those questions behind such an agreement. The agreement looks pretty good. Google Cloud says, I will host Mayo Clinic data and offer you that service. And Mayo will get, in exchange, AI expertise from Google, and Google will develop applied use of AI and of machine learning in complex use cases in care delivery. So it looks like a good win-win deal. Let's rejoice. However, when we read a little deeper into the scope of the agreement, we realize, and it's quite clear, both for Google and Mayo Clinic, that what is at stake here is controlling the patient data. Mayo Clinic is trying to keep controlling the patient data. You see that at the bottom. There's a clear statement that says, we give our data to the cloud provider, but we keep control of that data. Yes, but the cloud provider is accessing that data to do research, to develop algorithm, to deploy algorithm into the healthcare delivery of Mayo Clinic. So it's a give and take. Yes, but what is the connection between the data being directly or indirectly accessed by Google and the selling of the cloud services? Is there a connection here? Of course. The cloud services have been provided at a much cheaper rate than they would be commercially otherwise in exchange for the research and the access and the development of AI. And this is fair commercial practice, except that the insider vendors will tell you that they are forbidden to do this. If I sell a piece of equipment or an IT system to a hospital, I cannot, in this contract, have a research agreement. The research agreement has to be a separate contract. And the 2 contracts need to be independent from each other. Otherwise, you run into trouble in several countries with the authorities who have said, let's not mix research and other side benefit with a commercial transaction. But we are seeing that this is done here. And we are used to this. The new technology world is developing in a vacuum of rules and regulation, and we need to invent them. So it's not good, it's not bad, it's simply something we need to think about and know. A couple of weeks earlier, Apple, last September, released a new version of Apple Watch and announced some Apple Health study. So you're beginning to see that Apple is doing research in health. They call it Apple Health Studies. And they have partners with who they do that. That's a lesson that they've learned, is they cannot do that alone. That would look suspect and would not be efficient. In this case, They're teaming up with a public institute in the US and the Harvard Medical School. And they looked at a hearing study. The first one is simply convincing the woman that if they had an Apple Watch and they were tracking their menstrual period, they would be under constant surveillance, and they would be told if they have some disease they need to be aware of and need to be checked for. Wow, this is prevention. Prevention in action. This is a wonderful idea. Okay? The question is, what about the data? Where does it go? We'll see that the hearing study is working with another university. There's a heart and movement study where you see a much broader scope, charting how health rate and activity are related to hospitalization, serious falls, and general heart health and quality of life. Brigham and Women's and the American Heart Association. And way at the bottom, there is a little statement that says, Apple stressed during its presentation that it will be unable to access any identifiable user data collected as part of the study. I believe this statement is true. But you seeing now how in this wellness area, the commercial world and the research world are getting connected, which is a good thing. But where will that data go? What is going to be the woman's control if they participate to that data? Will it be part of their health record? Will it be accessible somewhere, or will it stay in an obscure database where no one is going to know what happened with it 5, 10 years from now? A lot of questions here. So we can continue. And then we see the tech giants at the White House making very positive comments, and you see those, but they are also very clear. We are interested by the data. So it's not a surprise, but it's simply something we need to realize and say, if such studies are being done, and I'm sure some of them are already done, and maybe the Polish government has not even thought about what is the Polish policy in those studies about the health data. Will that health data contribute to a shared record, openly accessible and under the patient control in Poland? So you see that we're doing those studies, we're creating bits and pieces, but we don't have the connection between all of those things. So we're creating an island of data under some vague control. What is the strategy to build interoperability, to share and access that data at the national level? This is a very important question. Now, I want to finish with one thought. And I may have given the impression that I'm using too much US examples. It is not the case. I could have used several European examples. The problem is Europe, there are 5 countries in Europe that have already understood this and that have a national interoperability framework in place that are basically saying to all of those agents, do whatever you want, but the health data has to be shareable and accessible, and these are the standards and the way that you need to connect and interconnect. Having such a national interoperability framework is probably one of the key steps in allowing all of those wonderful initiatives to be consolidatable and create something useful for the citizen, for the consumer. So the example I'm giving is after having spent $32 billion on meaningful use in the US, driven by the Ministry of Health, that spells disaster, because when the Ministry of Health starts writing technical specification, you can say, that's not their job. And those specs are abysmally complex, hard to implement, full of holes, with test tools that do not work. This is meaningful use in the US. Now, no one says this in the US, but I've been following the program very closely. I can tell you that IT has to come and help the Sequoia group to actually redo an entire new platform to test against the meaningful use standards, because what the government has done is so weak that it doesn't work, it doesn't interoperate. So this is an example where a public-private entity in which governmental entities, care delivery entities, commercial vendors, research universities, in this public-private, they are being given the responsibility to own the national interoperability framework. US term, it's called the TEFCA, very complex term, but it maybe speaks more to your ears. It's the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. So it speaks to technical things and legal things, so that information is never exchanged only with standards. You also need agreements and policies to make a trusted exchange of health information. And this has been entrusted to Sequoia. Why? Because they've been doing this, working without hardly any subsidy from the government, and it's working nationwide. 125 million patients are connected. They use the IG profiles. They've been very effective. They use the IG test tools. They are very effective, and they are, almost, I would say, 2/3 of the hospitals in the US are interconnected. You can get a patient summary from them, and they can access a patient summary for 125 million patients. So that's an amazing success, and that success is building upon in that public-private organization Sequoia has been handed over the responsibility to create, manage, and evolve this TEFCA. The other thing that has been included, which is things that I applaud, is they said, it's not enough to have a national interoperability framework. You need to have test tools available for that framework. And you notice the government speak where they say they have to designate and monitor the interconnected health information network. So those are the private islands all over the country. And how you interconnect them is what TEFCA does. So they need to designate them, saying you're a good one, you conform, but the word conform is never applied. You don't certify, you adjudicate non-compliance. Yeah, you test for conformance. Okay, guys, stop using techno-speak, okay? And the IG Gazelle platform is positioned to support this, and part of that TEFCA realization will be accelerated thanks to the IG support. So my message is very simple. You need some policy that set rules about using and maintaining and sharing patient data, be for a research study where it's collected out of real patient, or for deployments wherever they happen in Poland. And those islands of interoperability all need to have an open interface so that they can talk to each other at the national level. That's the national interoperability framework with the necessary testing so that you don't have broken things connecting to broken things and everybody saying it doesn't work. So it needs to be organized. So you see that the purpose is not to develop software. It's not to develop a central system somewhere in the country. That is needed in some cases. But far more important from a policy standpoint is the framework and the testing of that framework. And add the policies about who is authorized to own, manage, control, and what access should be provided to patient data, and how the patients on the long term can continue to manage their data. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bardzo dziękujemy. Pan też wróci na scenę w części panelowej. I jeszcze jedno wystąpienie wprowadzające. Jego gruntowna wiedza z zakresu opieki zdrowotnej to wynik ponad 20 lat doświadczenia w pracy na kierowniczych stanowiskach w sektorze opieki zdrowotnej. Jest prezesem Healthcare Denmark, organizacji partnerstwa publiczno-prywatnego powołanego do promowania duńskich rozwiązań i kompetencji w zakresie opieki zdrowotnej poza granicami kraju. Przed Państwem pan Hans-Erik Henriksen. Prosimy. 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 The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation to speak about digitalization in Danish healthcare. I'm Hans-Erik Henriksen, and I'm CEO of Healthcare Denmark. Healthcare Denmark is a public-private partnership. We are owned by the Ministry of Health, the Foreign Ministry of Denmark, the Ministry of Business, Danish Regions, the National Public Provider Organization on the public side. We are owned by all industry associations having healthcare companies as their members in Denmark, and we are owned by a number of Danish companies. It was mentioned that we expect doctors and nurses to work in a 2100th century setting, but we're still educating them to the old healthcare system. If we want them to take on new roles, work in a totally different setting, we need to educate them differently. And that's the reason why we now also have universities among the owners of Healthcare Denmark, University of Southern Jutland and the University of Aalborg. As mentioned in the introduction, it is our mission to do the promotion of Danish strongholds in healthcare with the underlying assumption to strengthen interest for Danish solutions and increase our export. And that is certainly also the interest of our patron, Her Royal Highness Princess Mary of Denmark, but she also sees our role as kind of fostering a dialogue with countries, between countries, on how we can address the challenges that all countries are facing. And how we carry out this mission is actually quite simple. We have a visitor program. You can go to our webpage, you can write to me if you want to visit Denmark and see for yourself what we're doing. We've had the pleasure of already having a number of delegations from Poland. We speak at international conferences, we join our royal family and ministers when we have official visits to other countries. We use present communication. And if you go to our webpage, you can find for yourself through small videos and white papers some of the things where we think we can contribute to other countries' issues. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the Danish healthcare system so you understand the setting in which we are driving digitalization. Then I'm going to talk about why digitalization is so important today, namely the challenges we are facing, the political initiatives we are taking. I'm going to talk about where we are at the moment in digitalization. And I'm going to talk about the new digital health strategy for the next 4 years in Denmark. The Danish healthcare system is a universal single-payer healthcare system. It's financed by our taxes. The size of the taxes, that's another story. But the good thing is that healthcare is free for all Danish citizens. It's free to go to the GP, to the specialist, to the hospital. We do have 16% out-of-pocket payment. That's primarily for dentist service and psychological help and some medicine until reimbursement kicks in, but that's it. And this makes the Danish healthcare system quite simple compared to other countries. We don't have a national health insurance. We have the Ministry of Health and their boards and directorates. We have the Danish regions, that's a public provider organization. They own all the hospitals, so it's public. They own all the outpatient clinics. The only private element is the GPs. They are private enterprises, but they get 99% of their income from the public healthcare system. And then we have the municipalities, 98 of those. With the reform in 2007, we gave them a bigger responsibility in healthcare. So apart from being responsible for elderly care, nursing assistance in private homes, they are now also responsible for strengthening the primary healthcare system. They are responsible for rehabilitation services outside the hospital, and they have a role also in population health and prevention. In Denmark, the general practitioner play a very important role. It's a gatekeeper of the healthcare system, meaning that you start with the general practitioner. And if the general practitioner decides, yes, you need to move on in the healthcare system, you need a referral to a specialist or a clinic or hospital, then you move on. And this even goes for emergency services. It's also the GP that do the triage. Of course, if you need an ambulance, you just dial 911, but in all other cases, the GP is the gatekeeper. That was the Danish healthcare system, universal coverage, single payer, paid by our taxes. So we already heard about the challenges for healthcare by one of the previous speakers. I'll not go into details, but the fact that we have more informed, better educated patients, we have changing demographics. We have more chronic patients coming to the board. There's increasing demand for healthcare services. And at the same time, we have more invention, we have more new medicine, we can do more for our patients. That is putting countries under budget pressure. And at least more than 80 countries we've been talking to in Healthcare Denmark, they have those challenges. And also in Denmark, of course, and 15 years ago it really turned up because waiting lists got alarmingly high in Denmark. In a public healthcare system, there's no mechanism by which more money flows into the system because the budgets are governed by the government, and therefore you get waiting lists when demand goes up and you don't react. And that was the situation around 2002, and it was so alarming that the government had to open up for private healthcare. That turned out to be expensive, and that spurred a structural reform, which I already mentioned in 2007. And it's also spurred another way of thinking, because the realization was, hey, the reason to this demand increase is probably not to just build new hospitals. Then we will soon run out of tax money. That is not sustainable. The reaction is to think about delivering healthcare in a new and different way. And this is the reason why today we have increased the quality of healthcare, focus on quality, so we avoid readmittance and infection. We have driven up productivity in Danish healthcare. We have a focus on early diagnostics of serious diseases, because the earlier you can detect a cancer or chronic disease, the better opportunity to address it before it moves into something that requires surgery, expensive treatment, or chemotherapy. We have a focus on using the resources of the patients. We heard about the importance of listening to the patients. That is a red line in all the strategies, in our cancer strategy, in our dementia strategy, in other strategies. Having the dialogue with the patient, using the knowledge of the patient as an element in treating them. And because this started already more than 10 years ago, we see the results at the moment. Compared to 2003, we treat 30% more patients in the Danish healthcare system with the same budget at the same staff. So we have driven up productivity quite well. An element in that has been the reduction of our hospitals. In 1999, we had 98 hospitals. Today we have 32. It doesn't mean that we closed down 60 hospitals or so. We closed down around 25 hospitals, but the rest of them were merged. And if some of you are hospital CEOs, you can imagine the productivity increase you could create if you were told, we have 4 hospitals in this city, now you can run them as one logical hospital with 4 locations. You would probably say, okay, we're not going to have specialization in orthopedic surgery in 4 places, we're going to have them in 1 place. And that is part of the explanation of the productivity increase. Even though we treat much more patients with the same budget and staff, patient satisfaction has gone up, it's stable. Our economy and budget is in check. The reason why it's going up is that we are making massive investments, and because of the focus on quality, standardized mortality ratio had gone down. And if we look at the serious and important diseases, COPD, heart diseases, and diabetes, it's the same picture. We are treating more patients with less reliance on the hospital and hospital beds. Actually, the average length of inpatient stay in Denmark is at the moment 3.7 bed days, one of the lowest in Europe. The COPD curve is interesting because the change of that curve coincided with the time when we started to do big-scale telehealth projects, and we have evidence that when you educate, empower COPD patients to be knowledgeable and use a tablet and be involved in regulating their own disease, you drastically reduce admittance and visit to emergency rooms. And that is the reason why this curve changed at that time. Digitalization plays a very important role. This is the strategy we just finished in 2017. This is the new digitalization strategy, which I'll go a little bit more into detail with later in the presentation. It is the most extensive, comprehensive digital strategy of Denmark ever. It's a paradigm shift. It's a question about changing the digital relation with the patient. Today, all Danish citizens can go to an e-health portal. They can see the electronic health record, all the lab results, referrals, medicine, and so forth. In essence, they have access to their own electronic health record. But this only works if the patients and citizens know it and if they take the opportunity. So we want to strengthen the digital relation with the patients. We want to use the opportunity not only to offer them digitalization and participation in their own diagnostics and treatment, we also want to give our healthcare system the opportunity to kind of push information and use that digital relation. It's also about measuring the quality of care, not as what's going on in the hospital, but based on the patient's perception of whether they got cured. It's about patient-reported outcomes. Digitalization is obviously also about a coherent healthcare system and connecting the healthcare system. It's about integrated care. It's about population health and prevention, using that digital relation with the patient to motivate them to a healthy lifestyle. And because we increase the number of data flowing electronically, we need to step up on cybersecurity. And actually, the Danish Ministry of Health just issued the English version of the healthcare cybersecurity strategy. To my knowledge, the only Ministry of Health that have issued such a strategy. But it's not about only making data bulletproof. We also need to protect the trust and the trust from the patients in sharing the data with the public authorities, because without that trust, we will not be able to move forward. And then it's about strengthening our infrastructure and architecture behind the scene, because we will share much more and much more sensible data in the future. This is aligned with a similar strategy for assisted living, because we want to keep our elderly citizens healthy in their own home as long as possible. We want to support that with technology to free up the nursing resources. And these initiatives, they push healthcare closer to the citizens. And that is why we reduced the number of hospitals. Not only that, we changed the role of the hospitals. 15 years ago, you could knock on the door of any hospital in Denmark. They would say, come in, we would look at you. Not anymore. Today, the 32 hospitals are specialized in one way or another, and 16 of them are being refurbished or new built. And those 16 will be the backbone of the future hospital structure. It's a place where you go when you have comorbidity and need highly specialized treatment. And it's a place where we teach and build the hospitals in a way that we motivate specialties to work together in a new way, because that is also needed in the future. This program is a 6.5 billion euro investment. It is renewing 1/3 of the bed capacity. And when I talk to my friends in Germany, they say, if we had to do this in Germany in a similar way, we should reduce the number of hospitals from 1,200 to around 400, and it would be an investment for Germany of 320 billion euros. So that talks to the extent of the investment in future healthcare in Denmark. We heard about the importance of personalized medicine. The genotype side, documenting the clinical genome of all their citizens, that can be done by any countries, and many countries are in the progress of initiatives in that way. The reason why this makes sense for Denmark, it's the phenotype side of the equation. It's the fact that we have electronic data on our citizens going 40 years back in time, electronic data going 20 years back in time to the specificity level and details of electronic health records and clinical databases, and the fact that we have a biobank connecting all Danish biobanks, giving electronic access to 25 million tissue samples. It's this side of the equation that make the Danish personalized medicine strategy fly, because you need that insights into the patients and their story to really make benefit of personalized medicine. It's not only a strategy. If you go to Denmark, you can visit the Danish Genome Center, where we start to collect the clinical genomics and DNA data and use it in diagnostics and treatment of patients going to our hospitals for certain diseases. So this is a slide from our Ministry of Finance, because they are also involved in the new digital health strategy. It's a kind of bold, because they say, stay at home. But the interesting thing is that the Ministry of Finance, with the Ministry of Health, with Danish regions and with the municipalities, they are united about the new digitalization strategy. They have discovered how much money there is in healthcare. This is probably more what it's all about, because digitalization and the healthcare strategy in Denmark. It's about creating an ability to deliver healthcare where we have the lowest efficient cost. One example, if we can have a specialized, specially educated COPD nurse guiding, helping COPD patients in their own home through telehealth, it's an example of delivering healthcare services where we have a much lower efficient cost than if those COPD patients went to the emergency room or as inpatients in a hospital. Another example, Danish nurses have equipment to test deteriorating conditions for elderly citizens in their home. Do they get enough nutrition? Is there a potential onset of dementia or depression? Can we do a physical test? That's another example, because if a specially educated home nurse can take action in the home of the elderly citizens before they move into frailty, it's an example of healthcare services with the lowest efficient cost. So where are we on digitalization? We started back in 1994, creating a health data network. By 2002, around 60 to 70% of all prescriptions, lab results, discharge letters, referrals letters were flowing electronically. At the same time, adoption of electronic health records across the healthcare system had been driven up. So somebody said, but when we have all this electronic data, why don't we share it with our patients to empower them, to give them insight? And that was the starting point of the National eHealth Portal in 2003. And that is why, as I mentioned today, I can access my own electronic health record, all data in a secure way through the electronic National eHealth Portal. And in the same way, any clinical professional who have me in treatment have the right to access my full electronic health record data. If we look at what's going on in the scene, this is not a question about a national system. In fact, all the hospitals and regions, they have different electronic health records. They can choose electronic health records on the market. So can general practitioners, pharmacies, other stakeholders. The point is, they need to live up to exchange standards in healthcare, HL7, XDS, and so forth. They need to document that they can replicate data to the National Service Platform. The National Service Platform is the system that governs different repositories of healthcare data, uniting them, enabling them to be shared in the healthcare system and with the patient. And this is the reason why I can access my own electronic health record. It's also the reason why that if you look at the medicine list in a hospital, a GP or a clinic, you see all the medicine the patient is getting, because data is replicated back. It's not only the medicine you prescribed or gave to the patient. And this is a big advantage for the healthcare system. So, further details on the new digital health strategy. It's driven by the challenges we're seeing in healthcare. It's driven by the new hospital structure, because we cannot do what we're doing, reducing and specializing hospitals, unless we have a solid highway to connect them and connect them with the rest of the healthcare system. It is because the patients want it. If you listen to debates in Denmark, it is the patient organization who is saying, don't hesitate to apply personalized medicine. Yes, it's more sensible that we use DNA profiles, but it is a risk to the patient's life if we delay this process. Don't spend the time on just discussing all the ethical issues. Get going and handle the ethical issues in parallel. That's what the patient organizations are saying. It's about supporting the political initiatives, because they are directing how we use IT. You see some of them up there, and I mentioned them before. And it's the 5 elements. It's 27 initiatives coordinated in a concerted strategy, which together move us towards these 5 objectives of the strategy. It's the dialogue and the patient as a partner. It's national telehealth, where we're moving towards being able to offer all our COPD patients support by telehealth by 2020, all in the country, and then we will move on to other chronic areas. It's about integrated care and real-time exchange of data. It's about prevention, as I mentioned, and it's about secure data and infrastructure. And again, by the end of the day, it's about bringing Denmark in a position where we can provide healthcare services where we have the lowest efficient cost in the healthcare system. Thank you very much for your attention.